The automatic doors slid open as a tall man in a dark hoodie and jeans stepped inside. The store was buzzing with activity. Cashiers scanning items, shoppers browsing the aisles, employees stacking shelves. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. But for the man walking in, this was more than just another store visit. This was his store. He had built this business from the ground up. What started as a small dream had turned into a thriving chain. But today, he wasn't here as the CEO. He wasn't here as the man whose name was on the paperwork, whose vision had turned into a reality. No one in this store knew who he was. And that's exactly how he wanted it, disguised as an ordinary customer. He wanted to see what really happened when the cameras weren't rolling, when managers weren't on high alert. He wanted to know how his employees treated people, especially those who didn't walk in with power, money, or status. As he strolled past the fresh produce section, something caught his attention near the checkout area. A young black boy, no, older than 10, stood hesitantly at the register. His small frame and the way he clutched his worn-out backpack made it clear. He wasn't just another shopper. He looked nervous, as if he wasn't sure whether he belonged. His left leg had a noticeable brace and his movements were careful, calculated. The CEO slowed his steps, observing. The cashier, a tall, heavy-set man in a store uniform, leaned over the counter with a frown. "I already told you, kid, you can't just stand here." The man's voice was sharp, impatient. The boy mumbled something, barely audible. The cashier sighed loudly. "Speak up. What do you want?" The boy reached into his pocket and pulled out a few crumpled bills, setting them on the counter. I just wanted to buy this," he said, pointing at a small snack in his other hand. The cashier scoffed. "That's not enough money." He picked up the bills, counted them lazily, and dropped them back on the counter. "You're short, either pay the full price or leave." The boy swallowed hard. His fingers trembled as he dug deeper into his pocket, searching for more coins. The CEO took a step closer, his jaw tightening. He was about to intervene when something happened that made his blood run cold. The cashier suddenly reached across the counter and smacked the boy's hand away. The small coins scattered to the floor, rolling in different directions. "I said you don't have enough. Don't waste my time." For a moment, the entire store seemed to freeze. A few customers turned their heads. Some whispered, but no one stepped forward. The boy's eyes welled up, his lower lip quivering as he bent down, struggling to gather the fallen coins with his shaky hands. The CEO's heart pounded in his chest. His fists clenched. Every part of him wanted to step in right away to call out the man, to demand answers. But he held back. For now, he needed to see how far this would go. What kind of people had he hired? What was happening in his own store when he wasn't looking? And more importantly, what was he going to do about it? The CEO took a slow breath, forcing himself to stay calm. His hands curled into fists, but he kept them at his sides. He needed to see how this would play out. Would anyone step in? Would the cashier realize what he had done and apologize? Or was this just another day at work for him, where mistreating people like this was normal? The boy stayed crouched on the floor, frantically picking up his coins. His fingers moved awkwardly, as if his hands weren't fully steady. The CEO noticed the way his left leg shook slightly as he balanced himself. It was clear the boy struggled with mobility. Yet no one helped him. The people in line shifted uncomfortably, but no one said a word. "Come on, kid, hurry up," the cashier grumbled. He rolled his eyes and crossed his arms, tapping his foot impatiently. "We don't have all day." The CEO scanned the faces of the customers nearby. A middle-aged woman in a red coat looked at the boy with concern, but quickly turned away when the cashier glanced in her direction. A man in a business suit checked his watch, acting as if nothing was happening. An elderly man near the exit sighed but didn't move. The silence burned. It was the kind of silence that said people knew what was happening was wrong, but no one wanted to get involved. The CEO had seen this kind of thing before, too many times. He had grown up watching his own mother get treated unfairly in stores, dismissed as if she didn't matter. He had seen how people looked at his father, a hard-working man, but judged just because of his skin color. He had promised himself that, when he made it, he would create a business where people were treated with dignity no matter who they were. And yet, here he was, standing in his own store, watching the very thing he swore would never happen. The boy finally gathered the last of his coins and stood up, his small hands gripping the money tightly. His eyes stayed down, avoiding the cashier's glare. I can put something back, he whispered. The cashier let out an exaggerated sigh. Yeah, maybe start with that. He gestured toward the small snack in the boy's hand. You don't need that anyway. The CEO felt something inside him snap. He had seen enough. He stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. Hey, is there a problem here? The cashier turned to him, barely glancing before shrugging. Not really. Just some kid wasting time. He doesn't have enough money. The CEO looked at the boy, then back at the cashier. And that's how you handle it? By knocking his money out of his hands? The cashier narrowed his eyes, finally giving the CEO a proper look. Who are you? You his dad or something? The CEO ignored the question. He turned to the boy, offering a small nod. Get what you need. I'll cover the rest. The boy hesitated. It's okay. It's not about want. You deserve to buy what you came for. The boy glanced up, his eyes searching the CEO's face as if trying to decide whether to trust him. After a moment, he gave a small nod. He set his snack on the counter again, along with a bottle of water. The CEO reached into his pocket and pulled out a bill, placing it on the counter. This should be enough, the cashier scoffed. You don't have to do that. He's not our problem. The CEO's jaw tightened. He kept his voice steady. You work here, right? That means every customer is your responsibility, including him. The cashier's expression darkened, but he said nothing. He grabbed the money, punched a few buttons on the register, and shoved the change back across the counter. The CEO took it and placed it gently in the boy's hand. Here, hold on to this and take your time leaving, okay? The boy gave a small nod, mumbling, Thank you. He grabbed his bag and quickly shuffled away, disappearing into the aisles. The CEO finally turned his full attention back to the cashier. He studied him, memorizing his face, his name tag. How long have you worked here? The cashier frowned. What does that have to do with anything? Just curious, the man scoffed. Too long if you ask me. The CEO nodded slowly. I see. He didn't say anything else. He just turned and walked away, leaving the cashier standing there, confused. The CEO needed to process what just happened. He needed to think about his next move. As he walked through the store, his eyes scanned the employees, the managers, the way people interacted. Were they all like that cashier? Or was this just one bad apple? His mind was racing. He had built this company to be different, to be better. But had he failed, one thing was clear, this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The CEO walked slowly through the aisles, his mind clouded with thoughts. The fluorescent lights above hummed softly, and the faint chatter of customers filled the air, but he barely noticed any of it. His focus was on what he had just witnessed. It wasn't just about one rude cashier, it was about what his store had become when he wasn't watching. He paused near the frozen food section, pretending to browse, but his eyes were on the employees. A young woman in uniform was helping an elderly man find a product, speaking to him with patience and kindness. Further down, a teenage employee was stocking shelves, humming a song to himself, completely unaware of the tension that had just unfolded at the register. So maybe it wasn't all bad. Maybe not every employee carried the same careless attitude as the cashier, but one bad employee was enough to ruin a reputation. One moment like that could drive customers away, make people feel unwelcome. He had worked too hard to let that happen. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He considered calling his regional manager right then and there, but something stopped him. He wasn't done watching. He needed to know more before making a move. Just then, a familiar voice caught his attention. That was messed up, man. The CEO turned slightly, seeing two employees near the back corner of the store. They were stacking boxes, but their conversation was about what had just happened. Yeah, the other one muttered. I mean, I get it, rules are rules, but you don't gotta treat people like that. Especially a kid, the first one said, shaking his head. And a disabled kid, too. That was just wrong. The CEO stepped closer, still pretending to browse. You think anyone's gonna say something? The second employee asked. The first one hesitated. Doubt it. People don't want to get involved. You know how it is. The CEO could feel the frustration in his chest. Even the employees, who saw the problem, didn't believe anything would change. That meant this wasn't the first time something like this had happened. He turned away and walked toward the front of the store again. He needed more information. He needed to know who was in charge today. Near the customer service desk, he spotted a woman in business casual attire, wearing a name tag that said, Assistant Manager Lisa. She was speaking to another employee, her arms crossed, looking slightly frustrated. He waited for her to finish, then casually approached. Excuse me, he said. Are you the manager? She looked up, slightly caught off guard. I'm the assistant manager. The store manager isn't in today. Can I help you with something? The CEO nodded. Yeah, I just saw something at the front registers. A cashier was being really rude to a young customer. Lisa sighed, rubbing her temple. Let me guess, Jeff. The CEO raised an eyebrow. Yeah, so this isn't the first time? Lisa hesitated, then shook her head. No, I've had complaints before. Customers have mentioned his attitude, but no one's ever really filed a formal complaint. It's usually just comments in passing. Has anything been done about it? Lisa looked around, lowering her voice. The store manager knows, but Jeff's been here for years. He's difficult, but he gets the job done, and we're already short-staffed. Firing someone isn't as easy as it sounds. The CEO could hear the exhaustion in her voice, but he wasn't impressed by the excuse. Short-staffed or not, allowing someone like Jeff to mistreat customers was unacceptable. What would happen if someone did file a complaint? He asked, testing her response. Lisa hesitated again. It would go to corporate, but unless it's something serious, they don't always act right away. The CEO nodded slowly. Corporate, that was him. And he was definitely going to act. Before he could say anything else, the sound of raised voices caught his attention near the entrance. He turned and saw Jeff, the cashier, arguing with another customer. A woman stood in front of him, her arms crossed. I saw what you did to that boy earlier, she said firmly. That was disgusting. Jeff rolled his eyes. Lady, I don't have time for this. You shouldn't be working here if that's how you treat people. Jeff scoffed. Then, don't shop here, no one's forcing you. The CEO watched as Lisa tensed beside him. Her eyes darted between Jeff and the growing number of customers watching the exchange. It was clear she knew this wasn't good for business, but she also looked unsure of what to do. The CEO had seen enough. He stepped forward, making his presence known. Jeff glanced at him, looking irritated. What, you got a problem too? The CEO's expression was calm but firm. Actually, yeah, I do. Jeff let out a humorless laugh. Of course. Another customer playing hero. The CEO tilted, his head slightly. Is that how you see it? Jeff folded his arms. Look, I don't make the rules. I'm just here to do my job. Your job? The CEO let the word sit for a second. Tell me, does your job include humiliating people? Knocking money out of a child's hands? Jeff's smirk faded slightly. I saw what you did. The CEO's voice was steady, but there was no mistaking the authority behind it. So did everyone else. A few nearby customers nodded in agreement. The tension in the store grew thicker. Lisa finally stepped in. Jeff, maybe you should. Jeff threw up his hands. You know what? This is ridiculous. He turned back to the CEO. If you've got such a problem, go ahead and file a complaint. Corporate doesn't care. They never do. The CEO stared at him for a long moment. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. He flipped it open, revealing a sleek black business card. The moment Jeff saw the logo on it, his face paled. The CEO's voice was calm, but there was no mistaking the weight of his words. Corporate cares more than you think. For the first time, Jeff looked truly unsettled. His bravado cracked as he realized who he had just been speaking to. The customers around them murmured, sensing the shift. Lisa's eyes widened as she recognized the name on the card. She took a step back, her mouth slightly open in shock. The store had fallen silent. The CEO slipped his wallet back into his pocket. "Now," he said, his voice steady, "let's talk about your job." The tension in the air was thick, the weight of the moment pressing down on everyone. Jeff looked around, suddenly unsure of himself. This wasn't going to end the way he thought it would.